From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode, Leadership Lessons from a Marathon. Mac and I went to, we had a busy week last week. We were speaking in Iowa on Tuesday of last week. And then on Thursday of last week, we were speaking in Indianapolis. And then on Friday of last week, we flew to Las Vegas and I ran a marathon. And on Saturday of that week. And one of the facilitators for one of the events we spoke at was very kind and thoughtful and just sent me an encouraging text message right before my marathon and just said, good luck in your race, and used or made the comment that there probably were a lot of leadership lessons to be learned from a marathon. And I had some time obviously to think about that as I was running the next day over 26.2 miles. And there are a lot of leadership lessons that we can learn from a marathon. So I wanted to do a podcast on it. I wanted to share some of my takeaways on leadership lessons from a marathon and share those with you, because I think there were some really good analogies for us as leaders and as women, but also really as individuals, because it comes down to, leadership. We first have to lead and influence ourselves well in order to be able to influence others. And so leadership really starts with being able to lead and influence and make the right choices myself first. So I wanted to share with you my top 7 takeaways, leadership lessons from last weekend's marathon. And this was not my first marathon. This was probably I think it was the 7th marathon I've done. And it was a downhill course, a net downhill course. And so it's much easier to run a little faster downhill, but it was unseasonably warm in Las Vegas last week. And they were having record high temperatures for this time of the year. And the forecast had not called for heat of just such unseasonably warm temperatures. And we started off at 5:30 in the morning, so very, very early. And we started off at actual Mount Charleston, so running at elevation and running downhill into and towards Las Vegas, or just outside Las Vegas, the outskirts. And starting at 5:30 in the morning, it was very cool. It was probably 40 or 42 degrees, so that was great. But as we ran, of course, we were descending, so we're getting closer to sea level, which made it warmer. And once the sun came up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, the day started heating up. And so the temperature by the time I finished, was 82 degrees at the finish line. And it was one of the toughest races I've ever done in terms of the heat and, just the conditions of getting dehydrated. And it's just so incredibly hot, and your body is working hard anyway, so overheating. And so therefore I had a lot of time to think about leadership lessons and leadership lessons and what I've learned about myself as I run marathons. I like to pick a challenging goal for myself because it gives me something to train for and work towards. But it also, it's not just about the goal itself. When we set a big goal like that, it's also about who we become in search of the goal, on the way to the goal. And that's what I really like about something like a marathon is, I physically have to, train and make a lot of healthy decisions that way, but it's also mental. It's far more mental discipline. And when we create discipline in one area of our life, it carries over into other discipline areas of our life. So here we go, top 7. Number one leadership lesson learned from a marathon is, when you're running a race like that, or stretching or pushing yourself, number one thing you cannot do is complain. I heard so many people as I was running, and they were complaining about the heat, and no doubt it was hot, and There's a difference in making a comment about the heat and just downright complaining about it. And what I've learned is that successful people um, don't complain. They don't focus their energy on complaining about something that they cannot control. Now, there's no doubt it was terribly hot, and the heat affected us all, I think. And I'd run through the aid stations, and I'd get a cup of water to drink and a cup of water to dump on my head. But once I've done everything I can to cool down there, then I've got to just keep running. And successful people don't complain, so they just keep on going. Don't spend energy on complaining about something and being negative. So number 2, successful people, uh, when they're striving towards a goal, they don't make excuses. It was not the time. I did finish the race, and it wasn't the time that I had hoped for, and certainly wasn't as good as I could have done. But we cannot make excuses. Leaders cannot make excuses. About the things that we cannot control. We cannot. It's so easy to say, well, gosh, if it hadn't have been hot, then I would have done a whole lot better, and that may be true, but don't focus our energy on making excuses for why we didn't do the best that we could. If you gave 100%, then that's all you could do. And if you feel like you didn't, then don't make excuses for something else or someone else. I call it the victim mindset, and I know I've talked about that in previous episodes. But number 3, successful people, successful leaders don't always listen to others. And there again, as I was passing people and it was hot, there were people just sitting down on the curb to rest, and that's okay. But I knew that I couldn't let my mindset be affected by that. And so I just really knew that that was a time when I needed to tune out the other people who thought they couldn't do it or didn't want to do it or thought it was too hot. um, and there's a difference there between listening to what you need to and taking advice, or listening to appropriate wisdom from a mentor. But don't listen to just everybody simply because they're talking. And I think as leaders, as women, that's where we get caught up a lot of times in negative energy of other people. So there's a time as leaders, and as individuals, that we don't need to listen to other people. And I just say be careful where you get your advice from. There's certainly a time when we can value and seek input from people, but make sure that it's the right people. Make sure that it's the right people. I think that's the key. Number 4, don't lose focus. That was a key thing. And it's not just focusing on the goal, but focusing on the milestone. you know don't get distracted about the overall goal, because I'll tell you, about mile 21, when I really felt like my energy was slowing down, and it was just so incredibly hot, it was so easy to focus on the next 5 miles and think, I cannot do that. But I could focus on the next aid station. And so really, that was what I did. I said, every aid station, what I'm looking for is just make it to the next aid station. So don't lose focus of the moments. And Mac loves to say that, don't focus on the mountain, focus on the moments. And I think that's really good advice. As leaders, we often get distracted by the big goal, but it can be overwhelming. So focus on the moments, because if you conquer the moments, you'll climb the mountain. The next one, don't worry. Successful leaders and successful individuals don't spend their time worrying about things they cannot control. And that's key, as we are using our mental energy, because so much of what we do in life is mental, and we cannot afford to lose momentum sometimes by worrying about things we cannot control, or creating fear in our mind. And fear is created in our mind. There's no doubt that we create fear, and most of what we're afraid of doesn't even happen. And so it's so intimidating, but it's so easy to do. But as I was getting ready to go to start the race, and I'm thinking about the next 3.5 to 4 hours, and it's so easy to be worried about, well, what if I don't feel as good as I want to? What if I don't have a good race? What if the weather's too hot? What if? But don't worry about that. Successful leaders don't worry. those cares and concerns may pop up in your brain. You just push them to the side, and there again, most of this is mental. It's more mental, really, than it is physical. Number 6, successful leaders don't worry about making mistakes. When you're taking on a big goal, the first and most important lesson is just get started. Just take action. Just take the first few steps forward. Don't worry about it being perfect. And, for me, that was true because as I started to run the first mile, I ran the first mile slower than my goal pace. But I knew that just get going and get that first mile, and the next mile comes easier, and the next mile. But so much of the time we won't take action because we're afraid of having it right or having it perfect or, doing the best job. And that's, most of the time, the first time we do anything, it's not our best attempt. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just take action. Just get started. Just do something. And you'll find it's much easier to keep momentum going after that. And then last but not least, don't quit. Don't quit. Leaders, don't quit. And I tell you, it was, it's always tempting when I'm running a marathon and you get to the last few miles and you're tired and you're worn out, and it's so tempting to just say, well, gosh, if I could just stop here, this would be good enough, wouldn't it? But that's where the discipline comes in. And I think as leaders, that's important. When we have cast a vision, whether it's a vision for our company and organization or a vision for our family to eat healthy, we might fall back or sidestep or take a detour, but don't quit. Don't quit. That's the key thing there. Because we may make mistakes, we may consider it a failure, but it's only failure when we quit trying, much like we've learned to walk. And I think I've shared that analogy with you before. But successful leaders don't quit. At mile 25.5, when that last half mile, 0.2, is the most difficult, but we don't give up. And really success most of the time is on the other side of what we're pushing through, most of the time. Wherever it gets toughest or most difficult, if we continue to push forward through that, we find that success is on the other side of that. So until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.